speaker is Damiano Rühl. He's working as a professional Clojure developer at Red Pineapple Media, as you can see on his shirt and on his other shirt, and on the back of his shirt, and probably on many other places. And he's going to talk about from zero to app in 6 weeks, and he's going to talk about React Native and Reframe and all these nice reactive technologies. So please use your hands in the appropriate manner, and let's greet Damiano.
Hello. So my call is talked from zero to app in 6 weeks. ClojureScript, React Native, Reagent, Reframe, Re-Natal, Firebase, Matchbox experience in just one talk. So my name is Damiano Rühl. As you heard, I'm working at Red Pineapple Media. I'm coming from a front-end and JavaScript background, basically, but doing since 2.5 years, I'm doing Clojure professionally. Not so much ClojureScript, even though I'm coming from a front-end, but this was more or less my first ClojureScript experience. So what's this talk about? 1 year ago, we wanted to create an MVP for an iOS app. The idea of this app was an app where you can create generic challenges. So they just have a goal and some normal stuff. You can invite your friends. You can update your today's score, and then you can win the challenge or lose it or whatever. Inviting friends is just sending them a link that's opening the app. And we also wanted to have a chat in there. The thing was, it was just an MVP. We had 6 weeks to creating it, and whatever we have at that point, we wanted to bring live. We didn't really thought we will also have a chat in there or stuff, but we thought we'd give it a try. The team for this project were 3 people. This was 1 PHP developer, 1 Objective-C developer, and me. One of the goals of this was also to bring the other developers up on speed on Clojure, because we're using a lot of Clojure in the rest of the company, and they should learn it. And we thought this is a good way to learn it, because it's fun. So how we approached that from the beginning, first we were splitting the work a little bit in the way that I was trying to get a setup running, because I had a little bit more experience. And in the meantime, the other 2 were trying to get playing around with ClojureScript, with Reagent, gave them this tensing from Martin Klepsch, which they could just start using it, and Figwheel was working everything. My first try was actually boot React Native, because of a talk I saw last year on the clojureD. And I failed. I just didn't get it running. It was, I'm pretty sure it was my failure, but I never worked with boot also. So afterwards, I heard about Re-Natal, and I tried it out, and I had immediately an app running that I could start working on. So then the decision was made, we go with Re-Natal. Re-Natal by default uses Reframe. So I just taught myself Reframe, read the documentation, was quite straightforward, easy to learn. I played around with it a little bit. And after that, I onboarded the other 2 developers, showed them what I did, and taught them a little bit Reframe, which was really easy to do. And from that point on, they could create all the views, and they could style it and everything. And I could concentrate on the more complex part, like the business logic. And this is how we did the whole project. In the end, this was quite a good idea. So what is Re-Natal? Re-Natal is a command line interface that you can use, which just makes it really easy for you to set up the whole project. As you see, there are a few commands. If you put them into your console, and you have installed before React Native and stuff, then it opens an iOS simulator where you have your app running. If you do changes, you have live reloading from Figwheel. It's using Leiningen, which was easier for me because I didn't use boot before. And what it also makes, it makes it really easy to use React Native components, which is quite important because there are a lot of React Native components out there that you can just use, and but it would be a bit difficult to put them in. But with Re-Natal, it just works. So what exactly is React Native? I guess all of you have heard of React already. It's quite common nowadays. And React Native is the same as React for native mobile apps. That means it's running your JavaScript directly on the device, but not inside a web view like other technologies. It's really using a JavaScript engine on the device, and it's also rendering UI elements. But it still feels like normal React, so you can use the same code more or less. For styling, they're using a subset of CSS, so that's also easy to learn. You don't have to learn how the stuff is working usually on mobile apps. You just do what you know. And the very cool thing is that most of the business logic you can completely reuse between iOS and Android, and even for the web. The views, most likely, you could also reuse the views, but most likely you don't want to because you have different designs for iOS and Android. And for web, of course, you need to use different views. But the whole business logic, you can just use the same. And another really big advantage for us why to use React Native was because we wanted to use ClojureScript, not JavaScript. And ClojureScript has a lot of really good wrappers around React. So meaning Reagent, Rum, or Reacle. And they all, by default, also working for React Native. So you don't have to invent a new wheel or anything. You can just use what you used before. And also what React Native gives you, because you are not in the browser, you don't have DOM, but you have this nice menu that you can open when you shake the phone. Or in the simulator, like you don't shake your MacBook, you have a button that you can press, which gives you some options. Like a lot of these you don't really know. Like you don't need to enable live reload because you have Figwheel, which is much better than the implementation from React Native. But what it gives you an inspector that inspects these UI elements, and you even can see the tree where this UI element is. You can see the width and the height, the padding, margin, all these kind of things, which is really useful. And another really important thing is the JS debugging. So when you open the JS debugger, it's opening actually a Chrome browser. And in that Chrome browser, you can open the normal debugger that you are used to use. And it will show you the error message there. You can just use JS console log or whatever to show something in there. You also, it's also supporting source maps so that you see where in your Clojure code actually an error appears. So this was not only nice, it was a feature that is needed, otherwise you could not really work with it. But React Native gives you all of that by default. So for using React Native, we decided to use Reagent. I used it before and I liked it because it's just really simple, and especially for the other developers, it was so easy to get them on board to that. So Reagent is just a really tiny ClojureScript wrapper around React and also around React Native. It's just using functions that return some hiccup, and this hiccup will then generating DOM in the browser, or in case of React Native, it's creating React components for you. Reagent is just a view part of your application. It's a small thing. One really cool thing it has some special kind of atoms. Reagent atoms, if you use them inside the component and something changes inside that atom, the component realizes that and renders itself again. So that way you just have to change something in the atom and you don't have to care about the re-rendering stuff of anything. It's just doing it for you. So yeah, but like I said, Reagent is basically just for the view part of your application, but you need also something for the business logic and the data flow, and there comes Reframe. So Reframe is a small framework on top of Reagent, which manages for you the data flow and your business logic. You see this nice graph that shows it a little bit. So the idea of Reframe is also you have your whole state in one big state object, one map, which is called DB because it acts kind of like your local database. And it's using handler functions to change something in your database, and it's using subscription functions to query data from it. So you can see it as a circle. The DB is hidden actually inside Reframe, and you're writing a subscription to query some data from it. The subscription you using inside a Reagent component. This Reagent component will create for you React or React Native components. These are then rendered as the UI. From the UI, there might be a user interaction, or there might be events from outside, like the server tells you some data changes, whatever. This is calling a handler. the handler is changing the DB object. If the DB is changing, the subscription is automatically recalculated again, and it's triggering the reagent component to render again, and so on and so on. What you are actually writing is only the handlers, the subscription, and the reagent components. The rest is done for you. So one part of it are the handlers. So like I said, the handlers are just responding to events, like user input. You can, calling a handler with the dispatch function, you just say which handler to dispatch, and you give it some parameters. And a handler itself is just a function that gets your old DB state and doing the change that you told them from the parameters and returning the new DB. So it's just, in that case, just a pure function that you can easily test, and it's quite straightforward. Then handlers have a really cool feature that is called middleware. Middleware are small reusable functions that you have to use for multiple different handlers. We use them quite a lot, for example, for debugging statements. So whenever you call a handler, the debug middleware we put actually to all handlers, more or less, and then it's just writing to the console which stuff of the DB changed and which handler was called. Or we did it for validating the schema. When you change the DB, you want to make sure that it's only really saving it when it fits to the schema that you defined. Or also, whenever we do any changes on the database, we want to persist it so that if the app crashed or whatever and you load it again, then you want that the data is not lost. Or tracking statistics on a service was also a good use case for it. The other part of Reframe are the subscriptions. Subscription is basically the way, like you query the database. It's the access from your view to get any data. So, and you can see it's actually just getting the database and also some parameters, like in that case we want to get the challenge name. You just tell it for which challenge, so you pass the challenge ID, and then it gets from the DB inside the challenges and the name. And in the reagent component itself, you can just call it with subscribe, and then you're getting a data structure that is also kind of a read-only atom. And this is the same as a reagent atom. It works the same way, that if the subscription changes, the view is just re-rendered automatically. So this is our tech stack so far. We're using React Native using real Objective-C code plus JavaScript core to really run the JavaScript that you are writing, or that is generated by your ClojureScript. Then we're using Reagent to generate these React components, and Reframe to handle the data flow of your for your Reagent views. And Re-Natal puts this whole tech stack just together, so that you can just use it without headaches and puts all the pieces together. You don't have to do all this configuration and setup stuff by yourself. So an important part, of course, when Clojure is the data and the data model. In our case, it was quite simple. One important part was that most of our data we want always to store when it's changing, so that it get not lost when the app crashes or when you close the app. But there are some parts of local data or in temporary data that you don't care if it gets lost. So for example, like if currently something is loading or not, that you want to show a loading bar, or the current date, or the whole navigation state. When you start the app again, you start from the beginning anyway, from the navigation. But all the rest we are automatically saving in the storage. And when the app starts, we're loading everything from the storage, just having one handler that puts everything to the DB, and then we're on the same state as we were before. So the navigation part here is, I didn't show it here because it's quite a big part. That was really painful for us. So what exactly is the navigation? The navigation means that you have, of course, different views of your app. For example, the list of challenges, and if you press one challenge, you want to go to the details. And you actually want to have that in your state where you are right now. And also in the navigation, you want to have a navigation bar on the top where you have a back button on the left side, which just automatically gets back for you. And you want a component that does that for you, right? And there are components in React which are called Navigator, Navigator iOS. But these are stateful components. That means you can tell them, show a new screen, and it's opening the new screen. But it's then the state where you are right now is saved somewhere hidden in this component. This is completely against the philosophy of Reframe. What you actually want to have is that you have in your state written where you are right now, what you are showing, every information, and then the navigation component should just take this information and do something out of it. So that when you change your state, it's automatically navigating for you with a nice animation or whatever. 1 year ago when we did that, there was something called navigation experimental. The name says a lot. It was not documented, but it was part of the code. Nowadays, it's even documented, so there is Navigator, Navigator iOS, and Navigation Experimental, because Facebook knew that this is a problem, because these stateful components are not a nice thing. Now, last week, I was also playing around again with it, and I saw now the new thing is React Navigation, so probably you should not even use Navigation Experimental anymore. It was really difficult to get this up and running, which is weird because it's actually a basic thing that you need in all kind of apps. So how it works in our case is that now we had the state of our navigation in our normal DB, and as you can see, you have an index and you have different routes. So the first, you have just one route in there, which is the initial scene that you want to show. It's like the list of challenges, and you have some information what to show in the navigation bar, like the right button is a plus, and if you press it, then you create a new, coming to another scene that creates a new challenge. And now when you have a handler that opens a new scene, then you just push something to the state, so in the routes, you have a new map that looks the same, and you put the index to 1, and then automatically it shows the next screen. So this is more or less how you want to have it. But like I said, this part is painful, so expect that you have to spend some time into that. There's a really cool example from this guy. It's called Victor Eriksson. It's Re-Navigate. At that time, I also stole a lot of code from him for Navigation Experimental. Now he's using React Navigation, so you should take a look at this if you want to implement something like that. So after we had done all the stuff and we finally had the navigation running, we had the whole setup. We could create challenges, we could track our process, everything was fine. So we had the first version. This took us already quite some time to get used to all those things. But the next step was that we wanted to have a challenge with a friend, because it's quite boring if you just do a challenge for yourself. That was not really what we aimed to do. So the problem is when you want to do a challenge with somebody else, of course, you need to share the data somehow. So usually you need a backend and with a database or whatever. But we didn't have the time to implement any servers or anything, and we didn't want to. So we looked at alternatives, and there's the service which is called Firebase. It was bought by Google, I think, 2 years ago or something. So Firebase is kind of a remote NoSQL database as a service. So you just can create a new database, and then you can call it. They're doing data synchronization in real time with WebSockets. But you don't have to implement any of these WebSocket stuff or any synchronization stuff, because they have really nice libraries, also for JavaScript, that doing all the stuff for you. The cool thing there is that you can save something in this database, and it acts like a local database. So you just save something, you have immediately the change, and in the background it will sync to the server. That even works when you are offline. So you can just save something, and you saved it, and if the app is offline, it goes online at some point, it will just synchronize in the background, but you don't really feel that. That is a really cool feature and made it really easy to implement for us. And there's a cool wrapper that is called Matchbox, which makes it really closer idiomatic to work with Firebase. Right now, Matchbox is not really working with the new version of Firebase, since Firebase is from Google. They did a lot of changes, and these changes breaking Matchbox, but I hope this will be fixed soon. One important thing for Firebase was that we had to change our data model a little bit, because we wanted to have the same data model on our DB object than inside of Firebase, because it made it much easier to reason about it. For Firebase, you need to have quite a flat data structure for a performance reason. And for that, it's also totally fine to have duplicated data. I will show you what I mean with that. So this was our Firebase data model that we used. It's quite straightforward. We have users, we have challenges, we have trackings, messages for the chat. So what I mean with flat is that we don't have the trackings inside the challenge or the challenges inside the user who create or whatever. For that, we then, if you want to see the challenges from a user, you have users' challenges. But if you're in the challenge and you want to see which user is in that challenge, you have participants. So this is duplicated data, but this is totally fine. This is how you should do it in Firebase. So before I said that Firebase has this amazing offline feature where you don't have to care what you're doing and it's just synchronizing for you. This is true completely for web. And the problem is that they're using the local storage to persist this data. So when your browser crashes and then you open the same app again, then it will load it from the local storage and do the synchronization magic for you. The problem is in context of React Native, you don't have this local storage. But it's not giving you a warning or anything. You just realize it at some point that this is not working. This was a bit problematic. So that means when your app is offline, you're doing changes, and then the app crashes, and you load it again, then all the changes are just gone. They're not in Firebase anymore. So what we did is we're saving all our database always in our async storage. By the way, async storage is something from React Native, which is like local storage is just a React Native implementation. It works quite similar, but it's using some Objective-C stuff to really store these things. And so we were persisting all the stuff that is also in Firebase always in our async storage. And when we started the app, we just saved again everything that was in our async storage into Firebase. As you can think about that, this will get problems in synchronization. Like if somebody else is changing a challenge and then you are doing the change, but then so when you go offline and next week you go online again, then you do a change, then this will override the change that maybe somebody else did. Luckily, in our case, it didn't matter because only the one who created the challenge could change the challenge and everything. So we didn't have any entities that could be changed from different users. And also, you could not use one user on multiple devices, so we got around that problem. I hope actually that this will be fixed from Firebase at some point because they are claiming that it's working with React Native, but they don't tell you that this really important part is actually broken. But yeah, it's actually fixable if you would just pass it a function to save something, then I guess somebody will do that at some point, maybe one of you. So after we implemented all of this stuff, we had almost no time anymore for chat, actually, and we thought, yeah, okay, we have to go live, we don't have time, but let's try this. But we thought this whole styling and stuff will take us quite a long time. In the end, the chat was the most easiest part of this whole project. The reason was, of course, somebody built already a chat with React Native, so npm install React Native Gift Messenger, save, Re-Natal use component, React Native Gifted Messenger, and then you can just use it. You just pass it all your messages. You pass it a handler that is called when somebody writes a new message. And we had a chat for free just because of the technologies we used, which I think was quite a cool thing. So we managed in the end to bring this stuff live after 6 weeks. Took us another 2 weeks to bring this to the Play Store. It's not so much fun bringing something to the Apple Play Store. Luckily, we had an Objective-C developer. Otherwise, we would not have been able to do it, I think. So if you do that, get somebody who did that before. So the conclusions, what did we learn from this whole thing? First of all, Reframe works really well also in the case of React Native. Since then, I'm actually a big fan of Reframe altogether. You should definitely read the documentation of Reframe, even if you're not using it, because it's really funny. But also, it is a really nice concept, and they're introducing really nice concepts. Also, they did really nice changes since the last year. I just read the documentation again. So also the documentation of Reframe explains you how Reagent works in a much better way than the Reagent documentation. So even if you just use Reagent, read that. What we also learned that there are a lot of React Native components. The chat thing was one, but we also used one for Mixpanel, which is the service where you can just push your trackings to. So there is already a big ecosystem for React Native, even though it's quite a new technology with a lot of components you can just use. And it's really easy to use them in Reagent because a component is nothing else than the core components that you're used to use. So you can just use it there. That was not an issue. What was also nice was the code reusability. So our app was only for iOS and from the beginning because, yeah, it was just a proof of concept more or less. But after that, we had a research week, and I thought, okay, I have 1 week. Maybe I try to port this thing to Android. And I managed to do that in 1 week. From this 1 week, I spent probably 4 days to push this to the Play Store, because pushing something to the Play Store is as awful as pushing it to the App Store. I hope Google is better than that, but it's not. And also, yeah, to install all this stuff that you need. In the end, the code changes were really minimal. I copy-pasted the view folder and changed just some component was only working on iOS, this kind of thing. But it was quite easy to make the code changes, and 99% of the code was just reused for Android, and it was working. In the end, it was in the Play Store without an image, because I didn't manage to have a nice image there. But one important thing was it was much more fun than Objective-C. I had to write some Objective-C in the past, and this was definitely cooler. And even the Objective-C developer, who has done like probably hundreds of apps in his past life, he said that he felt after a short amount of time much more productive, at least in creating UIs and styling these UIs. And another thing that I learned in the last week, because I wanted to make this source open source. I wanted to open source that code, whatever. And I tried to run it. I also wanted to make some screenshots for the presentation last week, and I started, and it was not working anymore, because my new Node version was not working anymore with the version of React Native. So I thought, okay, then I update React Native. Don't do that. Just not after 1 year. It was really, really difficult. I spent a week to bring this project running again, because also every JavaScript library or whatever what I used was not backwards compatible, and they're introducing a lot of breaking changes still. So this is, I think, difficult if you really create a production app. Then you have to be, either you update all the time, because then the changes might not be so big, or you don't update at all. That's probably also a possibility. I don't know how good that is. And it was not only React Native, it was also all the components were breaking. The stuff that worked really well, I also updated Reframe. For example, Reframe has a lot new concepts now in there and new functions for handlers, which are, from my perspective, much better. But the old code was working perfectly, just it gives you deprecation warnings. So all the ClojureScript part updating, no problem. Every JavaScript part updating, pain. That is definitely something to consider. These technologies are still quite new, not so much used. So you can get the source code from this, unfortunately, Bitbug link, the first one. You can download the app for Android, not anymore for iOS. It's not there. I tried to push it again, but I didn't manage to do that. But I will probably soon do that. If you play with that code, you have some questions. This was an MVP. The code is not really nice. It's not well documented or anything, so don't expect really nice code. We just had to bring it live. But if you have any questions to it, you can contact me there. And that's it. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Damiano. So I'm going to ask a first question. This Reframe library, can I only use it with Reagent, or can I bolted onto Ohm or any other React wrapper?
At the moment, it's still having some dependency from Reagent because it's using these Reagent atoms. But I know that he's planning actually to get rid of these dependencies, that you can use it for everything. But you should use it with Reagent because Reagent is amazing.
Are there any other questions? Yes.
Thanks. What were some of the difficulties you had in taking your working app and getting it into the Apple Store and the Android Store? You said it was painful.
First of all, I had to do stuff with Xcode. I'm just not used. I never used an Apple before. It's just the process was quite hard. You had all these certifications that you have to create and all this kind of stuff. I just had no clue about this thing, so I've never done this. So it was okay with having an Objective-C developer, but it was difficult for me without having any knowledge about the stuff. The cool thing with React Native was that you don't need to have any knowledge about these things, except at that point when you want to bring it to production, then you need to have some more. Yeah.
So was it just Xcode configuration and it wasn't further coding?
Yes, exactly. This was the basic problem, yeah, all the configuration stuff for it. Because Re-Natal doesn't really help you with that. You can create a production build, but to push it then also to the Play Store was a bit difficult for me. Yeah.
One last question.
So regarding the pain of updating React Native, I guess it would help to push as much code into pure ClojureScript. So, and which are the points where you think you will have to rely on JavaScript or React Native libraries? So what is the part that you cannot possibly move to ClojureScript because it's the part you have to rely on?
React Native itself. The whole core of React Native was just... so you're using all the components that are from React Native. For example, for React Native navigation, the experimental navigation that I used, they just changed the key children to key roots without saying anything about it. The problem is, okay, it's a small fix, you can easily fix it. The problem is when something is broken on the React Native side, you're getting error messages like can't find self. And with nothing else, you don't have any ideas, so you just have to step by step, like, yeah, try and error debugging. So comment something out, look at what is broken, and then you find out, the navigation is actually broken. And then you look into the code of experimental navigator and you find out that they're using no roots. But this kind of stuff was broken and really hard to... So the problem was, the stuff that was broken was usually small, but the problem was finding out what was broken was the really hard part of it, yeah.
So thank you very much, Damiano. You can meet him later at the evening event and ask any more questions about React Native and how things are broken.